Tough day for Mr. Manafort, but he's accepted responsibility, and he wanted to make sure that his family was able to remain safe and live a good life. He's accepted responsibility, and this is for conduct that dates back many years, and everybody should remember that.
I think Manafort is entirely a sideshow. We don't know what Paul Manafort knows, but there's no reason to believe that anything that Paul Manafort has will in any way implicate the President of the United States.
Interesting. Ken Starr last night on the show. Today, a plea deal officially from Paul Manafort, former campaign chairman for the Trump campaign. One count of conspiracy against the United States. We're talking about money laundering, tax fraud, failing to file the Foreign Agents Registration Act, lying to the Department of Justice. One count of conspiracy to obstruction of justice. That's witness tampering. He faced up to 10 years in prison on these charges in D.C., plus whatever he faced in those charges in Virginia. And under the terms of this deal, this is the big part, Manafort is cooperating with special counsel Mueller's investigation. Well, the White House put out a statement. Sarah Sanders said this had absolutely nothing to do with the president or his victorious 2016 presidential campaign. It is totally unrelated. Rudy Giuliani, the president's counsel, says once again an investigation has concluded with a plea having nothing to do with President Trump or the Trump campaign. The reason the president did nothing wrong. Let's start there with the panel. Jonah Goldberg, senior editor at National Review. Leslie Marshall, syndicated talk radio host. And Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist. Okay, Molly, significance, what we know, what we think we know.
Well, this relates to the special counsel, so this is significant that Paul Manafort has pled guilty. That special counsel was set up ostensibly to root out collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, and there has still been no evidence of that. One of the things related here was about failure to register as an agent of a foreign government. So if the special counsel is interested in a failure to register for Russia that deals with the 2016 election, he should start looking at Christopher Steele, who was the British agent who was secretly hired by Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee to create the Russia narrative, and that was weaponized and used by the FBI. At the same time, he was working for Russian oligarchs like Oleg Deripaska and lobbying on their behalf to the Department of Justice, to the number 4 guy at the Department of Justice, Bruce Orr. So if this special counsel is actually interested in what it was ostensibly set up to look into, he has a long way to go in another direction. Sometimes
the president likes what Alan Dershowitz says. Sometimes he doesn't. Here he is today reacting to all of this.
Well, of course they should be. There's nothing that he can testify to that would probably lend weight to impeachment, because he didn't really have close contact with President Trump while he was president, but he did have contact during the campaign. What they're looking for is self-corroborating information that can be used against Trump. Once he agrees to cooperate, he has to cooperate about everything. There's no such thing as partial cooperation.
And, Jonah, the question at the beginning was, should the White House be worried, or the president be worried?
Yeah, look, I think it should be a little bit. I think Sarah Sanders is absolutely right when she says the crimes that he was charged with in these cases had nothing to do with the president. The only thing that, and I tend to agree with Ken Starr, that Manafort may not have anything that touches the president. The only issue is he had to give Manafort something that Manafort wanted. He had to give Mueller something that Mueller wanted. Otherwise, Mueller wouldn't have given him a deal. Now, what that is has to be, at the very minimum, interesting. Now, whether it leads to impeachment or anything like that stuff, I dismiss Alan Dershowitz's arguments about, I'm not arguing for impeaching Donald Trump, but Alan Dershowitz has simply created a theory about impeachment, declared Donald Trump his de facto client, and then takes whatever argument that is useful to him to make it. Who knows what Manafort is offering, and who knows whether it's necessarily true. But it can't be nothing.
Yeah. Leslie, here's the president talking to Ainsley Earhart about Paul Manafort.
One of the reasons I respect Paul Manafort so much is he went through that trial. I know all about flipping. For 30, 40 years, I've been watching flippers. Everything's wonderful, and then they get 10 years in jail, and they flip on whoever the next highest one is, or as high as you can go. It almost ought to be outlawed. It's not fair.
Are you considering pardoning Paul Manafort?
I have great respect for what he's done in terms of what he's gone through. I would say what he did, some of the charges they threw against him, every consultant, every lobbyist in Washington probably does.
At the time, obviously, Paul Manafort was suggesting he was not going to cooperate.
And interesting, isn't it, that he said, you know, when you're facing 10 years, you're going to flip, and you're going to flip on anybody, even the person at the top. Telling, perhaps prophetic, we don't know, because we don't know what he is going to provide. Agree 100%. There has to be something of substance. There would have been no deal cut either way. Any lawyer knows that. But with regard to your point, this is a three-pronged responsibility that Mueller is tasked with, and one of which is the Russian meddling in our elections. And Manafort has relationships with a lot of different Russians, and that could be where he is going with this. Obviously, he is pressured and used this tactic to pressure Manafort to come to this point right now. And the big thing for Mueller is he was not in the room at the Trump Tower meeting, but Manafort was. And I think that's where he'll be able to have more information to know, quite frankly, if there was any collusion or any conspiracy. Not necessarily by the president, remember, but perhaps by members of his campaign.
Right. There is nothing that has been released in anything to do with Manafort that has anything to do with Russia collusion in the 2016 campaign. None of the charges in either of the trials or in either of the situations have had anything to do with the 2016
but to their
campaign.
point, they wouldn't have made a deal.
It
Right?
would seem that maybe there's something. Mostly what's been happening here in this very expensive special counsel probe is an investigation of FARA violations. So it might be more reasonable to suspect that he's going to cooperate against Tony Podesta or something like that, rather than something to do.
In my opinion, not big enough.
None of us knows. But to speculate when there has been not one scintilla of evidence, not one scintilla of anything dealing with collusion in the 2016 election seems also a reach.
Here's what we can't
Except for the Trump Tower meeting, which was evidence of collusion.
But nothing compared to, again.
And he was in the meeting, and Mueller needs to know what was happening in the meeting, which is why this testimony by Manafort will be telling.
Nothing compared to the Russia dossier itself, which has yet to be investigated at all by the Mueller probe.
Okay.
As we continue looking at all those investigations, the Secretary of State is talking about the former Secretary of State.
What Secretary Kerry has done is unseemly and unprecedented. Secretary Kerry ought not to engage in that kind of behavior. It's inconsistent with what the foreign policy of the United States is, as directed by this president, and it is beyond inappropriate.
I think everybody in the world is sitting around talking about waiting out President Trump.
Secretary Pompeo pretty hot today at the State Department, saying that Secretary Kerry is undermining U.S. policy as it stands now with regards to Iran.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time parsing through all this, which makes me tempted to give into my cynicism and think this was a clever ploy by Kerry to make his memoirs interesting, which I think is a really heavy lift. Because his office is saying that they actually briefed Pompeo about his conversations, and Pompeo knew about these things. I agree with Pompeo on the surface of it, that it certainly does look inappropriate, but John Kerry has been doing these kinds of inappropriate things for his entire career. When he was a senator, he would do this kind of stuff. People talk about him violating the Logan Act. And so it kind of feels like he's trying to just generate buzz for a truly unbuzzworthy book.
Leslie?
Well, if we're going to go with the Logan Act, it was 1836, and there was not even a conviction after the indictment.
Although there was a lot of uproar about Michael Flynn.
Yes, there was. But was there uproar about Tom Cotton? Was there uproar about the GOP in the Senate that sent, on my side, yes, but that sent a letter saying, hey, what? In a sense, wait out the Obama administration. You can't have the hypocrisy here in a different set of rules for one president over another, for one party over another. John Kerry is a private citizen. What he has done is not a violation of the Logan Act. It is not a violation of FARA.
To be clear, I think the Logan Act is garbage. I don't care about the Logan Act.
And we don't even know what that conversation was about. And I haven't heard John Kerry say that he told them to wait out. What did he say? I think everybody in the world is saying that.
Yeah, all right, last word.
If Mike Flynn's life was destroyed because he ostensibly violated the Logan Act, and that's what the Obama administration officials claimed, then they should have some tough questions to answer.